So we're picking up on slide 29. We're about to get into Marbury versus Madison. So the presidential election of 1800 comes around. There's this great political battle that's being fought out between the big government folks and the small government folks, the Federalists and the Federalists. They had very differing views on which direction we should head as a country. Does anybody remember what the Anti-Federalists wanted, what their view of government was? Cadence, thank you for volunteering.
The Anti-Federalists were not in favor of a united federal government that would make decisions for the whole of the country.
So they wanted a
States first.
small
Yeah.
federal government, yeah, exactly. And the Federalists obviously wanted the opposite. So the Federalists really are closest to modern-day liberal Democrats, modern-day big government Republicans. They had their support mostly in the Northeast. They favored a very broad reading of the Constitution in which a unified United States had a very strong federal government at the helm. Now, why might people have been a little suspicious of that? Well, we had just fought to get rid of that. Really, that was very reminiscent of King George III and his government. So we weren't exactly thrilled. A lot of people, anyway. The Anti-Federalists, the Democratic Republicans, in other words, they were closest to modern-day conservatives, modern-day libertarian Republicans, and they believed that the biggest threat to individual freedom was this tyrannical central government, and power in the hands of the common people in the states was to be preferred. Now, we've seen in the intervening couple of centuries that tyranny can take place at the hands of state governments. Tyranny, can also take place between individual people. This wasn't confined to a large central government, but maybe less of a chance of it happening on a smaller scale. And both sides really they understood that control of the courts was crucial to the triumph of their ideas. We have to pack the courts with Federalists. We have to pack the courts with Anti-Federalists. In this way, we can ensure that our ideas survive. How was your weekend?
It was fine. I just did a lot of homework.
Yeah.
Functional finals.
Yeah.
It was fine.
My wife and I watched Death on the Nile.
Was it good?
Very, very good. Doesn't have that high of ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, but
What about compared to the first one? How does it compare?
I'd say it was about on par with Murder on the Orient Express. Yeah. I was just very impressed. I mean, the storyline was great, obviously, but I was most impressed with the effects.
Yeah.
It's just, wow. Yeah. A lot to look at. I know they weren't filming on location, but man, that was the great computer imaging. It's an Agatha. It's a movie, an adaptation of an Agatha Christie novel, Death on the Nile, starring her famous Belgian detective Hercule Poirot.
Is it like a new movie? Or?
Yeah, the movie's new. The book's about 100 years old now. Yeah. So the results of the election of 1800. Jefferson and the Anti-Federalists triumphed over John Adams and the Federalists. And these Democratic Republicans, these Anti-Federalists, they won both the presidency and control of Congress, kind of like what happened in this past election. History repeats itself quite a bit. The election of 2020, when we studied the presidency, had a lot of similarities to the election of 1920 in many ways. Congress, though, there was a difference. Congress wouldn't change hands until the spring of 1801. The handover, all that, really took place in March instead of January. So the courts were packed with Federalists that Washington and the outgoing president had put there. So they really, Washington was pretty apolitical to my mind, but Adams really made sure that his ideas were going to live on. So the problem started pretty much immediately. Jefferson won the Electoral College 73 to 65. Smaller country, a lot fewer electoral votes then. The Electoral College, though, didn't distinguish their votes for president and vice president. Can anybody tell me what happened? Any students of history out there in this awake, engaged crowd? I'm just kidding, you guys are great, but yeah, Abby.
Didn't like the second place person become the vice president?
That was Jefferson when Adams became president, but good, that's good that you remember that. No? So Jefferson ran with a gentleman, went backwards, named Aaron Burr. Might sound familiar to you, famous for the duel. And each got 73 electoral votes. So he and his running mate tied. The House of Representatives had to break the tie and decide who was going to be president, Jefferson or Burr. I'm sure Burr wanted Jefferson to take it, but that wasn't his call to make. So 6 days and 30 ballots, neither candidate received the majority in the House of Representatives. Now I'm skipping through quite a bit, but some Federalists who wanted an orderly transition of power, despite their dislike of Thomas Jefferson, they conceded and they voted for him to become the third president. I don't think they thought Burr would be a whole lot better. So. And his inauguration, Jefferson's, was held on March 4th, 1801. And the 12th Amendment is enacted to solve this problem, addressing the preceding conundrum by requiring electors to name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president. Which makes a lot of sense. And probably should have been in there from the beginning, but the founders can't be expected to think of everything. Any questions so far? Comments, concerns, threats? No?